lot of these allies of the United States, like they were being described as adversaries or autocrats. It was really the focus here, two things. One of them was migration, and the second was what Vice President Vance calls censorship. He was trying to bring that MAGA message of the enemy within to the global stage. And specifically, he says that European leaders aren't showing that they have strong democracies when they sideline controversial groups. He went out of his way to meet with the head of the AfD. That's a political party that's under investigation in Germany because it's so far right and for potentially conducting extremism. And he mentioned that car ramming in Munich recently conducted by an Afghan migrant as an example of what he says is out of control migration. He says that's proof you've got to bring immigration skeptics into the...
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all having a great and wonderful day. Well, what we're going to be doing here is be talking about freedom of speech. Free speech, because that is one of the biggest things that I have. I am almost a freedom of speech absolutist. I am almost a I am a free absolutist, practically. Of course, there's going to be some restrictions, but here, near, or there. I believe that you should have the freedom to do whatever you want, as long as you know you're not breaking the bloody law. You know, committing crimes, killing people, stabbing people, raping people, stuff like that. So I think you have the freedom. This is part of, as I mentioned multiple times on the channel before, it is one of the main reasons why I started my channel. And we have this here where a crazy lady, Margaret, is saying, oh, well, it's free speech is the problem. But before we get into that, we have the EU here really not taking a good liking to JD Vance's speech about freedom of speech, and the fact that they're not taking it well. They didn't think it was going to go the way they didn't think it was going to backfire as much as it did, but it did, and they're a little scared.
Points that everybody here is buzzing about is Vice President Vance's speech to the Munich Security Conference. It was so sharp and strident in its criticism of European failure, in his words, to live up to their democratic ideals. He at one point referred to Europeans as commissars, claimed that they were throttling the free speech rights of Europeans. Not at all what the people here were expecting from an American vice president. I heard some people compare it to the speech that Vladimir Putin made back in 2007, very strident declaration of Russia's interest, assertion of a new role in the world. Some people heard Vance's speech here in that same way, as a challenge to Europe, and one that was, for some Europeans, quite upsetting.
It's an absolutely striking parallel that you're drawing there, and one that comes as Europe is asking for a seat at the table here in this pre-negotiation phase. I wonder if you can talk about that, and then also the baggage that Vance himself, from his days in the Senate, brings to these conversations with the Ukrainians. He was no such fan of continued aid to the country.
So, Ali, Europeans are frightened by Vladimir Putin. They see a big, threatening army to their east. They see Ukraine valiantly standing up to Putin, and they're worried about the future. They're worried that if the United States abandons them to Russia, that they simply don't have the firepower to enforce a durable peace. So I heard today from a number of Europeans on stage and off concern about, is America still really ready to back us up if we go into peace negotiations? Is America going to be there as a guarantor? I think there's a feeling that this war is in a stalemate, that it's gone on for a terrible, bloody 3 years. I don't hear anybody saying it's not time for negotiations to see if you can get a settlement. But again and again, Europeans say if it's not a just settlement, it won't last, and it certainly won't protect the security of Europe.
I am more inclined to say that the American people are sick and tired of wanting to help Russia, right? Or wanting to help Ukraine. I think that more Americans are wanting to avoid Ukraine at all costs and get back to America values. And I think that's the way it is. It's like what you guys want is that you want your pie and eat it too. And that's just not right. We cannot be stifled. We cannot be getting hurt constantly for what the Europeans do. It's like Canada and Europe, all these countries take advantage of the U.S. And it's time for the U.S. to take advantage of itself. And if you guys don't like that, that's a problem. I mean, we can do peace negotiation deals. So if you guys still want to fight, if you guys still want to take out Russia, be my guest. Go and do it. But you just won't have the support of the U.S. It's just that simple. If it's a Europe problem, it's a European problem. It's not an us problem. So without further ado, we're going to get directly into Marco Rubio versus Margaret here, where she is saying some insane things about all of this, well, the freedom of speech. And we'll be going over that and this right now. So without further ado, here we go.
By German intelligence because of extremism. What did all of this accomplish other than irritating our allies?
Why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies. The Munich Security Conference is largely a conference of democracies in which one of the things that we cherish and value is the ability to speak freely and provide your opinions. And so I think if anyone's angry about his word, they don't have to agree with him, but to be angry about it, I think actually makes his point. I thought it was actually a pretty historic speech, whether you agree with him or not. I think the valid points he's making to Europe is we are concerned that the true values that we share, the values that bind us together with Europe, are things like free speech and democracy and our shared history in winning 2 world wars and defeating Soviet communism and the like. These are the values that we shared in common. And in that Cold War, we fought against things like censorship and oppression and so forth. And when you see backsliding and you raise that, that's a very valid concern. We can't tell them how to run their countries. He simply expressed in a speech his view of it, which a lot of people frankly share. And I thought he said a lot of things in that speech that needed to be said. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would be upset about it. People are allowed, you don't have to agree with someone's speech. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but you don't have to agree with someone's speech to at least appreciate the fact they have a right to say it, and that you should listen to it and see whether those criticisms are valid. I assure you, the United States has come under withering criticism on many occasions from many leaders in Europe, and we don't go around throwing temper tantrums about it.
Well,
boom. Boom. I haven't been a fan of Marco Rubio because I think he might be an actual right-on Republican. But so far, his response on here is really good. And what I would say on this is that Europe and the UK, Sweden have done a lot of censorship here in their own respective countries. And I think it was extremely warranted and very nice for JD Vance to point out the hypocrisy and their actual activism of hating free speech. I mean, there were people being arrested for posting on Facebook in the UK. There are people that are not allowed to have a worship or pray in their country. Like, what are we doing here exactly? Like, these are the realities of what we as Americans prioritize for. This is one of the reasons why we left British. We wanted to be Britain. We wanted to be free, and it seems that Britain is going back to its old ways of authoritarianism, or at least the fact that they don't want their people to be free. And this is the reason why you Britons need to rise up. And they're like, oh, we can't. It's like, well, then, if you're not going to rise up, be men, then have your kids and all your future families suffer under the actual dictatorship and authoritarianism of your countries. It is not that hard to really understand here. I mean, come on. What are we doing? And, of course, this is going to get the big meatball, right? This is where Margaret goes full on retardism on what she says. And I cannot believe this woman says this.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship
I have to disagree with you.
So she has said that they use freedom of speech as a weaponization. Let's rewind that a little bit here and just hear what she just said.
Speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And
she says that freedom of speech was conducted to weaponize a genocide. Now, let's go and educate this reporter here, which is huge in quotation marks of what this is. So, the book burning of the Holocaust. So, what we have here, book burning. Beginning on May 10th, 1933, Nazi-dominated student groups carried out public burnings of books they claimed were un-German. The book burnings took place in 34 university towns and cities. Works of prominent Jewish, liberal, and leftist writers ended up in the bonfires. The book burning stood as a powerful symbol of Nazi intolerance and censorship. What's that, Margaret? That was censorship. So, again, this is what we had here in book burning. This is not very hard to find. Of course, you had this here, how the Nazi propaganda and censorship. The Nazis used propaganda to win the support of millions of Germans. Censorship helped to suppress ideas that the Nazis saw as threatening. The Nazis wanted Germans to support the Nazi dictatorship and believe in Nazi ideas. To accomplish this goal, they tried to control forms of communication through censorship and propaganda. This included control of newspapers, magazines, books, art, theater, music, movies, and radio. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, the German Constitution guaranteed freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Though through decrees and laws, the Nazis abolished these civil rights and destroyed German democracy. Starting in 1934, it was illegal to criticize the Nazi government. Even telling a joke about Hitler was considered treachery. People in Nazi Germany could not say or write whatever they wanted. So, Margaret here, idiot, communist. What are you talking about there? They used freedom of speech to weaponize genocide. Guys, this is the media for you. This is the media that is telling you that freedom of speech was used as weaponization. Excuse me? You don't read history. Here's what it is. CBS gets these news anchors or these journalists, and they get people that are super bloody dumb, that don't have any lick of history whatsoever, and then they spout this insanity and stupidity and propaganda to the whole audience to see, to show them that you are idiots and you can't understand. I just read you guys what the Nazis did and what Hitler did to ban censorship. And this dimwit here, this dimwit says this.
And we don't go around throwing
weaponized to conduct a genocide. And where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
This is what this woman says. What world are we living in, by the way? Also, let's add this to the fact. Weren't the Democrats crying when Ron DeSantis started banning and removing, those transgender books from schools? Were you saying that was censorship and not freedom of speech? Like, what are we talking about here? And you have the audacity to say that the Nazis used freedom of speech to use... You guys are unbelievable.
Where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. Okay, the point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe, and that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about. And I think allies and friends and partners that have worked together now for 80 years should be able to speak frankly to one another in open forums. without being offended, insulted, or upset. And I spoke to foreign ministers from multiple countries throughout Europe. Many of them probably didn't like the speech or didn't agree with it, but they were continuing to engage with us on all sorts of issues that unite us. So again, at the end of the day, I think that people give that is a forum in which you're supposed to be inviting people to give speeches, not basically a chorus where everyone is saying the exact same thing. That's not always going to be the case when it's a collection of democracies where leaders have the right and the privilege to speak their minds in forums such as these.
Mr. Secretary, I'm told that we are out of time. A lot to get through with you. We appreciate you making time today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look at her face. Look at her face. Yeah. This is what she had to close the interview because she knows. It's like, oh man, I effed up. I messed up because the fact that she just said what she said is insanity, right? This is the media, by the way, guys. This is the media. This is the media that cares so much about Americans that they don't care about your freedom of speech. They don't care about what you do. They only want how to control and power. And it's like our countries are being run by dictators, authoritarians. And Margaret shows exactly on what that is. She shows exactly on how our countries and how everything should be run, at least by her standards. And this is insanity, and it should not be allowed. It should be called out immediately. Well, guys, that's it for the video. Let's guys share. As always, take care, my friends.
Burn down the city, scream at the top of your lungs till you're dizzy. You can cancel everything and everybody in it, but it's not your